In this section, we are going to talk about factoring polynomials where the leading term is not equal to 1. Like, for example, 3x squared plus 11x minus 20. So let's go through the steps. Step 1, factor out the GCF. So in this case, we have no GCF, but if we did, we would, of course, factor it out. Then you make the x factor. So in the x factor, you take the first term times last term. So in this case, 3 times negative 20. And we put that on top. So 3 times negative 20 is negative 60. That goes on top. The middle term, 11, goes on the bottom. Then we need to find two terms which multiply to negative 60 and add up to be 11. Now, remember I told you guys in class for section 5.1 or 5.2 that when you have a bigger number like negative 60, you write down all the factors of negative 60 starting with 1. So you have negative 1 and 60. You have negative 2 and 30, you have negative 3 and 20, negative 4 and 15, then you have negative 5 and 12, and you have negative 6 and 10. And always go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, of these, which of them adds up to 11? And that's going to be negative 4 and 15. So those are going to be the two numbers that I choose. All right, now, here's where you have to be very careful. Before, in section 5.2, we just did x over negative 4, x over 15. Okay, but if we did that, so if we just did x minus 4 times x plus 15, that's incorrect because x times x gives you an x squared. And already it's wrong because we need it to be 3x squared. So doing it this way is not correct. This is incorrect. Here's the correct way of doing this. So you have a 3x squared and you ignore that square, you ignore the 2. So we put the 3x on top of each of these numbers. So it's going to be 3x over negative 4 and then 3x over 15. So that's going to be this step. Find the two numbers, write the term ax on top of each of these two terms to make a fraction. And then step 6, we reduce the fractions and then make them fall over. So let's take a look at our two fractions. One of them is 3x over negative 4. This one is already reduced, so we can't do anything with that. But 3x over 15, that's not reduced. 3 and 15, they both have a common factor of 3. So if I divide these both by 3, this gives me x over 5. And now this is the reduced form. So my first one, the 3x over negative 4, the 3x just falls over. So I have 3x minus 4. The other one, if I reduce it, I get x over 5. And then that falls over, so I get x plus 5. So let me take you guys through the steps again. Up to here, I think this is review because we've done this in the other lesson. Finding two numbers which multiply to negative 60, add up to 11. But the new step is we ignore that square. So ignore this part, just ignore that. And we're going to put 3x on top of each. So we have 3x over negative 4, 3x over 15, then reduce both the fractions, and then have them fall over once they're reduced. Now, once you're done, I recommend that you check your work, either you mentally or on paper. So we have 3x times x, that's 3x squared. Then I have 3x times 5, which is 15x. Then you have negative 4 times x, which is negative 4x, and negative 4 times 5, which is negative 20. We add the two middle terms, and we get 3x squared plus 11x minus 20. That's exactly what we started off with, so we know that this is correct. All right, let's take a look at the next one. You want to factor out 5x squared minus 14x plus 8. So first we look for a GCF. We have no GCF here. Next step is to make an x factor. I put 5 times 8, which is 40 on top, and I put the middle term, which is negative 14 on the bottom. Now I list out all the things that multiply to 40, but notice that they add up to negative 14, so you have to have two negatives. So I have negative 1 and negative 40. I have negative 2 and negative 20, go in order. Negative 3 doesn't go into it. I have negative 4 and negative 10, and I have negative 5 and negative 8, and that's it. Now out of these, negative 4 and negative 10, they add up to negative 14. So I'm going to put a negative 4 and a negative 10 as my two numbers. Next step, ignore that 2, ignore this 2 here, and just put a 5x on top of each. So I have 5x over negative 4, and I have 5x over negative 10. So now the 5x over negative 4, this is already reduced. So if I take these individually, 5x over negative 4, that's already reduced. However, the 5x over negative 10 is not. I can divide these each by 5. So this gives me x over negative 2. So the 5x over negative 4, this falls over, becomes 5x minus 4. The x over negative 2, the x falls over, becomes x minus 2. And this is your answer. Do a quick check. 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. If we add the like terms, this does gives me 5x squared minus 14x plus 8, which is absolutely correct. Okay, so once you have this x factor, just remember to write the 5x on top of each and not just an x. Okay, next one, we want to factor and solve. So first, do we have a GCF? We have none. We have no GCF. So then we go straight to our x factor. We take 6 times 20. That's 120. Put those on top. And the middle term is 23. Now, what I would like you to do is I'd like you to take all the factors of 120 and list those out. 2 and 60, 3 and 40, 4 and 30, 5 and 12. Not 5 and 12, 5 and 24, I'm sorry. Then I have 6 and 20, and then 7 doesn't go into it. There's 8 and 15. And notice that 8 and 15, this adds up to 23. So those are going to be my two numbers. Okay, 8 times 15 is 120. 8 plus 15 is 23. Then ignore that 2 and put a 6x on top of each. I have 6x over 8, and I have 6x over 15. Then I'm going to reduce these. So 6x over 8 is not reduced. I can divide these each by 2. So this gives me 3x over 4. Then I have a 6x over 15, also not reduced. If I divide this by 3, this gives me 2x over 5. So these are going to be my two factors, 3x over 4, or 3x plus 4, and 2x plus 5. Now this time though, it's equal to 0. So we're not quite done yet. Now before we solve these, you should do a quick check. So do a quick check to see does this work, and the check works. So it's 6x squared, 15 and 8 is 23x, and then 4 times 5 is 20, so the check works. Once the check works, then you take 3x plus 4 is equal to 0. You take 2x plus 5 equals to 0, and then you solve these. So for the first one, x is negative 4/3. And for the second one, x is negative 5/2. Okay, let's do one of each. I'm gonna do one of each, and then so like the second one will be done in class. So this one's gonna be done in class, and this one's going to be done in class. All right, so factor and solve. Let's start with the GCF, because remember the first step is always to take out the GCF. In this case, we do have a GCF. So between 12, 39, and 36, you got to figure out what goes into all three of these, and that would be 3. 3 goes into 12, 3 goes into 39, 3 goes into 36. Now with the x cubed, x squared, and x, the most number of x's we can take out of each is going to be 1x, because the last one only has 1. So our GCF is going to be 3x. So let's take out the GCF and determine what's left over on the inside. To determine what's left over on the inside, we are going to divide everything by 3x. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and x cubed divided by x is going to be x squared. 39 divided by 3 is 13, x squared over x is x. 36 divided by 3 is 12, and then the x's cross out. So this is going to be my remainder inside the parentheses. It's called a quotient. A quotient is a result when you do division problems. So our quotient is 4x squared minus 13x minus 12. Now we got to factor this. Once the GCF is done, we leave the 3x alone, and we're only going to focus on factoring this part. So factor only this. We have 4 times negative 12, that's a negative 48, and then we have a negative 13. Now, if you'd like, write down all the things that multiply to negative 48. There's negative 1 and 48. There's negative 2 and 24. There's negative 3 and 16. There's negative 4 and 12. And then there's negative 5 doesn't go into it, but there's negative 6 and 8. Notice I have one negative and one positive because they multiply to be a negative. So we have to have one negative and one positive. Now, of these, which of them adds up to 13? So negative 3 and 16 does. That adds up to 13. However, notice that we have a negative 13, but if you put a negative 3 and a 16, that adds up to be a positive 13, which doesn't work for us. So we need to have a positive 3 and a negative 16. Now, ignore that square and put a 4x on top of each. So we have a 4x over 3 that's already factored. That's already reduced, I mean. And then we have a 4x over negative 16. This one can be reduced by 4. We can divide these each by 4. So this gives you x over negative 4. And now this is also reduced. So I'm going to rewrite this over here. I have the 3x that's separate from the parentheses we factored. And then that parentheses, the 4x squared minus 13x minus 12, this got factored into 4x plus 3 and x minus 4. Now do a quick check just with that parentheses. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times negative 4 is negative 16x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. If you add your like terms, this does give you a negative 13x, so that checks out. That's good. All right, now we want this to equal to 0. So now the zero product property says that all three of the terms, you have to set them equal to 0. So we're going to set 3x equal to 0. We're going to set 4x plus 3 equal to 0. And we're going to set x minus 4 equal to 0. And notice we have 3 different solutions because we have an x cubed, which means we have 3 solutions here. For the first one, if I just divide both sides by 3 because I want to get the x by itself, then I end up with x equal to 0 as one solution. For the second one, I subtract 3 from each side. So this gives me 4x is equal to negative 3. And then I divide both sides by 4, so x is equal to negative 3 over 4. That's my second solution. And for my third solution, I'm just going to add 4 to both sides. So I get x equals to 4. So these are my 3 solutions. So for an equation with a cube, I usually get 3 different solutions. All right, next one we'll do in class. Last example. You want to factor and solve 5x squared minus 320 equal to 0. So the first step is you factor out of 5 because that's my GCF, my greatest common factor. If I divide these both by 5, let's see what happens. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so this gives me x squared. And then 5 goes into, we got to figure out how many times does 5 go into 320. So take a calculator to do 320 divided by 5. So we have 5 times 6 is 30. And then 5 times 4 is 20, so we're left with a 64. Now notice that x squared minus 64, this is a difference of squares, a squared minus b squared. So I'm going to split up the x squared as x times x, and I'm going to divide the negative 64 as a positive 8 and a negative 8, and that equals to 0. Now, just like before, we have 3 different terms, so we set them all equal to 0. We set 5 equal to 0, that's an outside term. We set x plus 8 equal to 0, that's our first factored form, a factored term. And then I said x minus 8 equal to 0, that's our second factored term. Now 5 equals 0 doesn't make any sense. 5 can never be 0. If you look at our previous example, we had a 3x, there was a variable there, which is why we were able to solve for x. But if there's no variable, 5 equal to 0 doesn't make any sense, so we have no solution. From the second one, we get x equals to negative 8, and from the third one, we get x equals to positive 8. So these are going to be your 2 solutions, x equals negative 8 and x equals to positive 8. And that last one we will do in class.